concepts of object-oriented programming within the Python programming language, and we'll try to simplify it to an extent that it feels cheating at some point. So let's try to understand what is the object-oriented programming in Python. The object-oriented programming is, I don't know. So let's figure it out. There isn't any proper definition for it. People say lots of things, but I don't really understand those definitions at all. Those textbook academic definition is not very useful for implementing OOPS on a daily basis. So I never understood that. I'll show you how I understood object-oriented programming in this video. So in an object-oriented programming, there will be a class. Don't ask me what it is. You will understand it very soon. There will be an object, and then there will be attributes, and then there will be methods, and there will be something like a self. Don't worry about it now. We'll understand what a self is later on. Come on, come on. Okay, right. I'm back to my screen. So something really happened with my screen, and I, for a moment, couldn't really see my screen. But yeah, don't worry. Now we're going back to the screen. So we've got these elements within the concepts of object-oriented programming. You've got class, object, attributes, and methods, and self. What is a class then? Think of it as a classroom. And then we have got object. What is an object? Think of it as someone who goes to the classroom, like a student, or it's me in this case. What are attributes? Attributes can be books that you read in the classroom. Obviously, if you walk into your school's classroom, you would see there are elements. For example, you've got bench, tables, chairs, you've got a blackboard, you've got chalks, or probably some sort of marker to write on your whiteboard or blackboard or whatever. Those are called elements. And all of these elements are attributes. You've got a pen, let's say. You've got chair, table. Then you've got activities that you do within the class. And that's called those activities are called methods. Like read, write, listen, speak. These are all methods, right? Methods are also called functions. See? And what is a self? Self is obviously a current object, but let's not bore ourselves too much with those concepts that probably won't help you on a daily basis. So yeah, let's write a class, right? When we're defining or creating a class, we have to write class first in Python, and then the name of the class. In this case, we are creating a class called classroom. Yeah. And then within the classroom, we'll first send all the parameters, meaning all the attributes, meaning all the elements you have within the class, chair, table, blackboard, whiteboard, whatever it is. And how do you send it? We send it through a double under, come on, through double under init, double under, and then we've got a self, and then we define what are going to be sent within that. So let's not worry about it right now. Let's think about the elements that you need to use, right? So what do we need within the classroom as elements? We need a blackboard, right? Um, before blackboard, we need a book within the classroom, and then we need, and what's going to be the book? The book is going to be the self-named book or book name, and then we have something called a teacher name. So obviously there would be a teacher within the class. Yeah, not really. Yeah, that wouldn't be a very good example. Let's think of um, a pen that a student would write with, right? Pen color. So where do you get these values from? You get these values from here. Because when you define the classroom, we pass these variables to be utilized within these parameters, or we pass these parameters to be utilized within these variables. So So when you pass the variables, we can also pass the color of pen, pen color. Yep. So we have defined So we've defined the elements that will be required within that classroom. So now let's define the activities, the function that you can do, an object a student can do within a class. So for example, a student can read a book within the class, right? So we define a read function. And when you define the read function, we will be utilizing the elements available within the classroom. So what are the elements? Books, tables, pen, pencils, all of these things. For that, we need to make sure that we only utilize the elements from within that classroom, not from outside the classroom. When you do that, we mean self. Self means utilize that's available within this classroom as elements. So you cannot rely on other classrooms for elements. Don't go somewhere else. Utilize from whatever you have got within that classroom. And then we've got print. Think of functions or methods. These are methods. Methods are functions, and these are activities that a student can do. So let's say a student is writing with pen color. Oh, sorry, not writing because it's a read function, reading the book and book name. For example, whatever the book name there is passed. And we get this value of the book name from the values that we have passed through the parameters within the classroom, and we'll see how we do that. Then we can write a write function because a student can utilize that pen that we have given as an element within the classroom, and then we can write with that. But again, we need to make sure it's self because we cannot go outside this classroom and steal someone else's pen. Print writing with pen of color. So you've got the self and then pen color. And now our definition of the classroom is done. So we have already successfully defined the classroom. Now we need to define an object. What is an object? Object, I mentioned already, is a student, whoever attends the class. So let's say I am attending the class, I'm student number one, and then what class am I attending? Obviously, let's say this university has lots of classes. We can attend whichever and whatever we want to attend. And then the differentiation happens at the level where you define what are the books being made available within that classroom. So obviously, let's say we call it fundamental of maths. This is one of the book that's made available within that classroom. And then you've got a pen a color of pen that you write with. Let's call it blue color. So you'll be using a blue color pen only. And then at that point, when you ask as a teacher to the student to write, you can literally see what is the color that the student uses to write with. So if you save this Python piece of code, and then you can see the writing with a pen of color blue. Now, if you change the color to red, the student will be writing with pen of color red. And then let's say you have a different student, student 2, and you can literally assign the same attributes to that student, but you can change the subject name, you can give it a different color to use for pens, and then you can ask the student to either read or write. So let's say you ask the student to read. And when you save the piece of code and then you run it, and you'll see the first student is writing with a pen of color red, and the second student writing with, reading the book, Fundamentals of Physics. So yeah, that's how you can understand object-oriented programming in the simplest way possible. Obviously, this was the simplest explanation, and this was one of the simplest examples. Obviously, you can complicate it to whatever extent you want, and probably in some other tutorial I'll cover that.